So I asked for the privilege of starting off because I get to say, in my country, I've never been able to say two words, my home country being the US. So I get to start off by saying, Madam President.
For the second time in this country.
For the second time in this country, yes. Obvious, powerful, necessary word. So I'll say it a few more times if you allow me. But I also know her as Halla because we've known each other for a while. I know that in this space that is about women leaders, it's not obvious to a lot of women leaders why men are here. So maybe I'm starting off with why did you invite all these suits in the room to be part of this conversation?
Well, as you can see, you're still in a minority. I think I learned maybe the most powerful lesson in life on October 24th, 1975, when women in Iceland had the courage, solidarity, and humor and joy, I want to say, to take the day off and show that the world didn't work without them. Yep. And what I asked my mom and her sisters, she was one of 8 sisters, why they were taking the day off or on a strike. What I learned from that answer, it was so simple. She said, we're doing this because we want to show that we matter. Yeah. And I think that was the day I began to think that I might want to matter, and I think that was the day I began to rethink leadership. And I'm still rethinking it. It's a lifelong journey, that everybody ultimately wants to matter, to be heard, to be seen, and to be valued. And I am afraid that even if I've dedicated much of my career and life to empowering women and girls, and the work is clearly not done, even if Iceland leads the way, we have a lot of work to do still on that front. I think we're losing the boys in this journey. Yeah. And I think we may have forgotten that boys and men have a gender. That we all have a gender, and that gender is far more powerful as a concept than counting how many of each sex or different sexes are at the table or in the room. So I don't see how we can eradicate gender-based violence or fully close the gender gap, which no country has done, without bringing in boys and men. And I am afraid that this is already catching up with us, mentioning the previous panel, that we are seeing real challenges in our democracy because I don't think men understand what kind of a vision of being a good man, yeah. or they don't have visions for healthy masculinity. They don't feel needed. They have old ideas around it. And in the world we live in, which is largely the attention economy and the online manosphere, we're losing them to very dark corners of those spaces, and they're easily radicalized, and they're coming out to vote for candidates that take advantage of that. Yeah. So I feel very deeply and strongly that mental health is the real pandemic we're living through right now, and that it is hitting boys and young men particularly hard, and maybe even harder than young women. Not to say that young women don't have mental health challenges, they certainly do. So I feel like the next 5 years need to be, if we want to close the gender gap by 2030 in Iceland or beyond, we need to work 10 times harder on bringing boys and men to the table. So very welcome to all of our honorary sisters and good men in the room.
We'll take that. Thanks. I think you highlighted what we see as a lot of the issues with men happening right now, but I want to start with one point there. If the rest of my points don't get across, is what do boys and men aspire to? I think the 50-year journey with Iceland of you gave women something to aspire to 50 years ago, right? When you said, I want to matter. We deserve full equality, full humanity in the world. There's a cause to march around. And I think part of our challenge with boys and men is so many of our conversations have been around harm, have been around the negative, have been the what not to do. Many young men tell us they feel blamed for all the mistakes, the domination, the use of violence by others, and not a language that says, what can you be? And I think I have the vantage point of being a girl dad, and raising her, she's now 27, just how much, and many of you have heard me say this before, how empowering it was as a parent to be able to say there's a North Star for you, which was for girls, you can be anything, right? It was looking at powerful women to say, follow that. There are lots of scripts here. And I think for boys and men, we've not filled in a space that says, I want to talk to boys and men about gender-based violence, but I want to talk to you about love and about care and about being a fuller human. And even our words, we haven't even come up with, I think, good language about what aspirational ideas about manhood look like. And then we see it in the data around us, what's happening. Boys are now behind in school in about 100 countries in the world. UNESCO, World Bank did reports on this 2 years ago. There was sort of silence about it. Not much conversation. A few countries doing some great work. You'll hear about some work in the US on that topic later on from Richard Reeves. But there's not much of a global conversation about that. Men's sense of economic precarity. The more our data finds, the more young men don't feel that the world offers them an economic opportunity, they're ready to tear down our democracy. They're ready to push back on all the advances in women's rights. We have to ask ourselves, do we have space to show compassion and empathy about that and to work on fundamental economic equalities? You mentioned the online worlds. And I want to counter a little bit kind of a myth out there that young men are going online looking for harm and to become violent extremists overnight and to do all kinds of devious stuff. Our data suggests that about 70% of what guys are going online for is just being human. Connection, how much water to drink, a good exercise workout, sports groups who like similar stuff to you. How do I get somebody to like me? How do I dress nicely? Basic stuff that we used to ask our brothers or peers when we used to hang out more in the physical space. 70% of that is innocuous, benign, or positive. The 30% that they get drawn into is nefarious folks who feel they see that we've not done a very good job on the progressive side talking to boys and men, and they're getting their message out there. Really good data point from colleagues in Ireland who looked at if you register as a young man online, go into YouTube, which is the mothership of where young men are online, register, put your demographic falsely as a 15-year-old guy, and ask innocuous stuff. Who's the best football player in the world at the moment? Et cetera, et cetera. Put some of that stuff. The average they found in their research is 23 minutes, misogyny will come to you. Even if you're not looking for it, the angry internet will come to you within 23 minutes. So I think we've got to step into there and say, what are we doing from the progressive side who care about the hearts and souls of boys and girls? What are we doing? And we've occasionally with our team said, that is a frightening statistic, but actually if you spend any time online, 23 minutes is a freaking amount of long time. You can do a huge amount there. So how do we step into those 23 minutes? I want to pass this back to you, because with that challenge, we were talking a little bit backstage, and you talked about this idea of a boys' revolution. And so as a Madam President leading all this amazing stuff that you and Hannah have done with this forum, what do you mean by a boys' revolution?
Well, I prefer to call it a gender revolution, but I prefer to recognize that boys have a gender also. I feel like we've been talking about closing the gender gap with only half of the population that makes up the gender spectrum. And so I think we need to include them. And you know the data much better, Gary. You're an expert in this, but I'm reading right now Notes on Being a Man by Scott Galloway, and couple of alarming facts he raises there that really I've been thinking about because I've been seeing some of similar data in Iceland, is that 15% of young men say they don't have a single friend. Yeah. I think we have a loneliness pandemic. For sure. It goes up to 28% if they're asked if they've had close in real life interactions. And so we're seeing alarming rates of loneliness. And that's also happening for young people in general, largely because we're tethered to the screens in our hand at all times. We're seeing something like up to 40%, Scott Galloway says, of young men who have never approached a woman in real life to try to sort of get to know her. Yeah. So it is insane, because as human beings, we've never been more connected and yet disconnected from everything that makes us well. Whether that's time with ourselves or connection to each other or connection to a purpose and meaning and a way to matter in this world, or connection to nature, which I think is also part of the problem when we don't even get sunshine in our eyes anymore. So I just think that this is actually making us lonely. It's increasing violence. It's this attention economy we live in is stopping us from being able to process our emotions. Yeah. And so one of the things that I think there's lots of things we probably need to do, and there are no easy answers here, but we cannot close the gender gap, is my conclusion, without bringing in boys and men. 40% of women are subject to gender-based violence. The perpetrators are, by and large, men. And I could continue with the data, but what I'm really occupied with, Gary, is what young men are telling me. They are basically telling me they're lonely. They're coming to me asking for a hug. From young boys to young adult males. They want a human touch. They want to be embraced, they want to be seen and valued, and they want to be in dialogue. And one of the things I've been doing is I've been hosting these compassion circles of 25 to 30 people. And first they were sort of mixed across genders and generations, and we were really talking about the mental health pandemic and how we could meet the rise in violence and poor mental health with more love and compassion and care. But I decided, because of what I was hearing, to host one with only men. Yeah. And it is one of the most amazing experiences I've experienced. And my husband came with me, and we had these young men who had kind of different ideas than some of the older men, and they really opened their hearts. But an unforgettable moment that happened there was this sort of middle-aged gentleman who was very buffed, very sort of muscular, and he had tattoos on every part that I could see of his body, and he was feeling like really strong. And I had asked a friend to bring some inmates to the discussion, so I'm thinking, oh, this is probably one of those like really scary men, and if I go to him, he's gonna say something terrible, and we're gonna, I'm gonna lose this whole dialogue. So I was trying to go to what were more gentle-looking men in the room, trying to bring out the love and compassion I was looking for. But then this guy leans in, and I couldn't ignore him anymore. So he leans in and he says, I have done everything wrong in my life. I have been an addict to everything. I've committed every crime possible. I've done wrong by my children. I've been in jail. But I am out, and I've learned to meditate. And I have learned that I'm a strong man, because on the inside, I'm just a soft teddy bear. Wow. And I will never forget this moment, because after that, even the tough guys who had spoken wanted to speak again, because all of a sudden they said, maybe we need some tools to be vulnerable. Maybe we need some spaces and learnings and lessons on how to deal with our anger or feeling not seen or feeling not valued. Maybe we need to think about how we're educating boys and what we're teaching them. And maybe we need role models that are different. And all of a sudden, the whole conversation broke open. So I think we need to create more safe and brave spaces for men to have this conversation. Yeah. You and I've done some of that. We've sat down with CEOs of big fashion houses and big companies and talked about it. And we had a barbershop here 10 years ago with the 100 most sort of leading powerful men in Iceland, and that was a transformative experience. So I think we need more of that. I think we need to rethink education. But Gary, you're the expert. I'm really looking for answers from you, because I see the problems, I see the red flags,
in 2 minutes.
But I need you to help us.
Well, I get to plug that in 2 minutes I won't provide all that, but if you come to our leaders talk this afternoon, we're launching what we're calling the Men Care Changemakers Initiative. And the idea is to step into 7 solutions, and we called it care because it feels like such an obvious word, and I think your examples bring that up as well, that men are looking for. And I think of an interview that I had with a man in the middle of the US about 6 months back. Before everything he said, I'm a conservative Christian rural man. And you thought he was going to go into all kinds of, Trump supporting whatever. But he just kept saying what mattered to him in his life was his daily interactions with his children. Dropping them off, picking them up, braiding his daughter's hair, going to his son's baseball practice. It was all he could talk about, but he kept needing to say, I'm a Christian conservative rural man. As if, to say, this is who I am. But everything that mattered to him was about who he cared about. And so it feels to us like care is an obvious one to step into. Our data finds that if you ask men, what does it mean to be a man? In the US, provider comes out at the top. The UK, we just asked this question as well. But very close to provider is being a friend. And if you talk to 16-year-olds who are lost and confused, what do they deeply care about? They'll probably mention a friend or two, even if it's been a while that they've had one. So I think to step into the fact that we are able to care, it is the pathway to get a conversation going. And it seems to reduce the kind of polarization that we're so often getting stuck in. So whether it's doing the hands-on care work, whether it's helping men break the silences and loneliness and the crisis of connection that you talked about, we think that's clear. I see that very related to the cause that you care about as well, which is gender-based violence. And first of all, I'd say we should probably rename that field and call it is men's violence against women that we're talking about in 90% of the cases. That is not decentering women as survivors by talking about men, but it makes you see that the solution is working at better lives for men. Because men who use violence, we're not born wired to use gender-based violence. We learn it. We are traumatized when we see it. We know that watching it or experiencing it as a child is the strongest driver of using it later on. If you care about the trauma and harm in boys' and men's lives, it will pay forward in the lives of women and girls too. So I think that's where we see a care. If you care about boys and men, they will also care better for others, their children, their partners, and others. And I'll just end on one piece that I think we should also be concerned about, that as we look at these other social issues, is what, the kind of the third thing that came up when men define what it is to be a man is to find a meaningful, intimate relationship. And we have, amongst the other crises that we have with men, 40% of young men in the US, about a quarter of in the UK and other countries, similar numbers, say they don't believe anyone will ever fall in love with them. Women think that as well.
Sad.
Very sad. And if for those of us who think intimate relations are kind of, really important in our lives, that our sons aren't getting the sense of relational skills to do that well. Girls are complaining about, young women are complaining about this as well. So that's what we want to lean into. I don't always end on this, but I think, I want men to feel that they can love and care and be connected with all of their human abilities to do so.
And I think that kind of a world where we can all be seen and needed, where we can be vulnerable and loved and we can love is certainly a world we should be able to agree with. Yeah. But I need to address something before we just close, because I have been having this conversation both publicly and privately for a number of years, actually, but even more powerfully in the past year. And I often am told by women, feminists like myself, my God, we have barely gotten into the double digits of women in leadership, and we've barely made inroads. And do we now need to make space for boys and men already? Are they, kind of what is going on? I hear this a lot. So I just want to address that in a world where we're facing, where we are at war about literally everything. And we are so divided and spreading hate and violence at the rates we are, online and offline. I don't think we need a gender war. So if we could just really make it an inclusion revolution or a full gender spectrum revolution, I think it's about creating a better world. Yeah. So it's not really about one gender or sex over the other. It is all of our world to be saved.
Will you allow me a provocation to the group here?
Please.
We've said for years in the space of men working for gender equality, men as allies in this space, that men of quality are not afraid of equality. And I'd like to provoke a group of mostly women of quality should not be afraid to show compassion toward men. I don't think we run out of our feminist zeal. You don't run out of your feminist zeal by also caring about men. I do think we can do both at the same time. Walk and chew gum and do, and send in text messages and run ahead of state and all those things. I know you can for sure. So I'd like to provoke that. There's a lot of work that we've got to do so that this is an and conversation. And I think we're not there yet, but I look to you to help us do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, everyone.